Hi. That was refreshing. I'm Adam. It's a little bit after Thanksgiving. It's been about a week since the Nocturne card techs were revealed. And here I am. I'm going to record this video for you. Now, I haven't really played any Nocturne since it's come out. I've done like dabbling online, not all that terribly much. So past my playtesting experience, which is pretty limited, I didn't do all that much with Nocturne compared to the other sets I worked on. And notably, the last half of playtesting was when I kind of disappeared off the face of the earth due to lots of other issues, which I've talked about on videos and streams before. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff in Nocturne, and I want to talk about it. These are my first impressions, and they're more first impression-y than other first impressions that I've given. There are cards in here that I've just never played with. They didn't exist when I was back there, and I haven't played with them yet. So, like, surprise, LOL. I have my Dominion box. My dividers are these black ones because they're temporary. I haven't even sleeved my Nocturne cards yet, but they're in there. Let's talk about Nocturne cards, yeah? So, and the cat over there, I don't know if you can hear him. He's talking about too. So the first thing I want to mention are the spirits. There's 3 of them, and they're not in the supply, so comparing them to other cards and ranking them is not really something that makes sense to do. They're all good cards, right? I mean, Will-O-Wisp is a cantrip. It's got an upside, and they draw other Will-O-Wisps, so that's pretty dang good. Imp is like a lab, only it doesn't give you the action all the time. You have to play a unique card. This is a great card for the game. They're all great cards for the game. And then Ghost is super great. It's a night duration. You throw an action at the start of your next turn. So having 2 Ghosts in your deck is really, really good. And it doesn't have a lot of problems that Golem has where like it doesn't work if you draw your deck or something like that. Because since it's a night card, you can buy a card and then have your Ghost find that card. Or one of the cards that you bought. So it's always going to hit something unless you're like full greening. So anyway, these are spirits, and I wanted to at least address these before going on to some of the cards that use the spirits. So let's talk about cards that use the spirits. Devil's Workshop. So Devil's Workshop, how good do I think this is? This is a good card. The obvious comparison is to Ironworks, right? It's +1 action, gain a card costing up to 4. I mean, it's different than Ironworks, right? You can't gain and play with it. However, you can't use Ironworks to gain a gold, and gaining a gold is pretty stinking good sometimes. And also, this gains imps, and imps are good. Imps are really good. So, like, most of the time, you're going to be happy to gain an imp from this, and you're going to play your turn around the idea that you're going to want to gain imps with it. After a certain amount of time, you know, the imps are less good because you only want so many of them in your deck. And this is something that you don't play anymore. However, this is a really good card, and it's on the level of Ironworks. Situationally, it can be better or worse than Ironworks, and Ironworks is a really stinking good card. So that's how good this is. Exorcist. So this one uses all of the spirits. It's a night card. It doesn't have to be a night card. The main difference of it being a night card is it's non-terminal because night cards don't cost an action to play. But then the gain and play tricks, they don't work with Exorcist. Here's the thing. Trashing is great, and this trashes cards. So that's super great. Trashing Estates gives you Will-O-Wisps, which is super great, especially if you're going to have coppers around. This thing is pretty slow at getting rid of coppers. Getting imps and ghosts is a real pain to do with this card. You can do it, so like if you really want that reliable deck, there's a pretty big hoop you can jump through in order to do it. However, that's not really practical, and so the fact that this card is very slow to give you the actual like cool benefits that put it above cards like Forager or something, which is just your basic non-terminal trashing. that makes Exorcist pretty slow, and so that really diminishes how good it is. This is a mediocre card. I guess I should be saying, like, on my Adam scale of 1 through 10, how highly I rate these cards. Or 0 through 10, I should say. And I'm just going to be pulling these numbers out of my head. I've not thought about any of this at all. Devil's Workshop. Let's put this at an 8. Exorcist, I'll give it a 4. Okay, moving on. So these are boons, okay? There are little tiny bonuses that you get along with other stuff. So I'm going to do all the cards to give you boons after this, but I wanted to look at what the boons are. What are the important boons? The Flames Gift is by far the best boon because trashing is super OP. It's hard to evaluate these in a vacuum, but this is the big one. You're really happy to see the Flames Gift a lot of the time. The ones that draw you cards are pretty good, and that's sort of about it. I guess the one thing I wanted to say about boons is, like, so you're gonna like, playing around particular boons is really difficult to do because there are 12 of these, and they all do very, very different things. The main 4 are up in this corner, the 4 boons that you want to try and play around if you can. Like, these are the ones that can actually affect what you do and actually affect the power level of cards. So boons that give you money typically will alter the way you play. Trashing a card, if you're going to receive a boon, it's good to have a card that you want to trash in hand. And then having a treasure in your hand that you can discard to get the Earth's Gift. Those are the big things that you want to try and play around when you're getting a boon. So try and maximize the benefit of these because they're actually good if you do. The rest of these are just kind of things that you can do. I mean, the Sky's Gift, I don't think that's worth playing around, but like discarding a treasure, I think that's worth playing around. So I guess that's what I think about boons. Let's talk about Bard. Bard is not a very good card. For most of the same reasons that, like, Woodcutter is not a very good card. It's a terminal silver, and what are you getting, right? I would say the comparison to Woodcutter is pretty apt. When you have the terminal space to spare, which is very rare, but when you do, yeah, go ahead and get it. Like, you're going to be happy to have this stuff, and Bard is fine. But it's just so rare that actually happens, and you usually have better things to spend your terminal space on. I mean, what of these are you going to try and get that, like, makes having a terminal silver worthwhile? Like, maybe trashing, like, that's 1 out of 12. Like, it's not fantastic. So, like, Bard is about where Woodcutter is. I'd give it a 3, maybe a 2. I'll give it a 3 out of 10. Blessed Village is a $4 village. Villages are really good, so this is going to get a high number, and it's got an upside. Like, I'd pay $4 for Village most of the time. When you gain this, you get a boon now or next turn. This is the big one where it makes sense to play around these things because you want to typically buy your Blessed Villages first in case you can make use of this money. Also, if you're not going to spend all of your money that turn, you don't want to play all your treasures. You only want to play the treasures you need so you can make use of the Earth's Gift and the Flame's Gift. So that makes the most sense to think about for Blessed Village. Getting boons is great, especially when you can delay it to the start of your next turn where it's actually potentially going to help you. So, like, the Wind's Gift is super great at the start of your turn, or both the River and Sea's Gift are super great at the start of your turn. And then a lot of these can be made use of regardless. So this is really good. Like, I think I ranked most villages like this around 7, and maybe the really good villages at 8 or 9, and this is an 8. This is an 8 out of 10. Idol. So it's a silver with an upside. So you get a boon, and then you give curses, and then you get a boon, and then you give curses. So silvers with upside typically aren't very strong. However, giving curses is very strong. In any deck where you can collide idols, that becomes the focus of your game because junking your opponent is very good. And if you junk your opponent, it's going to make it harder for them to collide their idols. That requires thinning. Thinning is winning. Great. If you can't thin, idle really isn't that much more fantastic than, silver or most other fivers you can get. You're not really happy to get a $5 silver in those decks, so you're not really happy to see it here either. And that's a lot of the, that's half of the cases. Boons typically are okay when you're playing treasures. So, like, you want to play your idols first for the Earth's Gift and the Sky's Gift. And also, like, I mean, it doesn't particularly matter all that much for, like, a lot of these other ones. But, play your idols first, I guess, is the thing. But, like, a lot of these are kind of, they're kind of mediocre. Like, you've usually planned a lot of your turn out by that point anyway. And these, I just don't find that these really help you all that much when you're playing treasures. It's really about giving curses. So if you can do stuff like crown an idol, like there's interactions that can really focus down getting curses. Like, I'm not going to crown an idol so I can gain 2 boons. I'm going to crown an idol so I can give 2 curses. That's really all I have to say about idol. Idol's a cursing attack, so it's going to get a big number. I'm going to give idol a 6, and I could see 5. Like, it's tough for me between 5 and 6. I'll give it a 6, though, because purples are really bad, and you want to give them to your opponents. Sacred Grove, $3 in a buy, and everyone gets a boon, and sometimes your opponents don't get it because it doesn't make sense on their turn. The boon thing, so like most boons are more useful during your turn than otherwise. However, the ones that your opponents don't get are the ones that are, more useful anyway. So like a lot of this stuff is a wash. Like really the only 3 that you're happy to see with Sacred Grove are the 2 that your opponents don't get, and probably the Wind's Gift. The Wind's Gift is usually much more useful for the person whose turn it is, especially because you've played an action card here. So this one's pretty good. But this is $5 for a woodcutter plus $1, basically. Like, that's not super great. It's got a plus buy on it, and it gives you money, so like, sure. And, you play 2 wine merchants, I guess you're getting this value, and playing 2 wine merchants is okay, but, like, this isn't stellar super fantastic, so I'm going to give this a 5, and I could see this getting worse ratings. Like, 4 makes a lot of sense for this card. I mean, you want it sometimes, it's just not super fantastic. Druid. Druid, I think, is a very good card for the game of Dominion. I like this card. It's not very strong. Most like at the beginning of the game, you're going to be looking at 3 boons, and you add a buy to that, and you calculate what Druid is capable of doing. And yes, there's flexibility. So that's something. But if you add, a boon to this, typically it's not going to be very good. So there are a couple of exceptions. So obviously the Flames Gift is OP. And, like, gaining Will-O-Wisps is pretty good. Maybe the River's Gift. Like, I'm kind of stretching here because, like, this really isn't that good. So, like, I'm looking for kind of 2 out of 12 boons. And really just the Flames Gift. Flames Gift is what's going to make this super great. But the Will-O-Wisp, it's pretty good. So, like, with those out, Druid is decent. Especially for something with 2, that's got a plus buy on it, it costs you 2, so that's something. Otherwise, it's just going to be ignorable, and I think it's ignorable enough of the time that I'm going to give it a 4. Great. Fool. So this is our first heirloom card, and we're going to be shifting from the boons to the heirlooms, so we're going to be doing all 7 of the heirloom cards. Heirlooms is my favorite mechanic in Nocturne. I think heirlooms are so much fun, and I think, in particular, the 7 heirlooms that we see are really, really well done. Like, they go with their action card in a way that's aesthetically pleasing, satisfying, has interesting implications on gameplay. I'm really happy with heirlooms. So here's an heirloom. It's just like a copper, only it gains you silver every time you play it. And it comes with Fool. So when you play Fool, you take Lost in the Woods, which if you already had it, then Fool does absolutely nothing. But when you take Lost in the Woods, which is a good thing to have, you get 3 boons, and you get them in whatever order you want. Getting 3 boons for a card, that's pretty good, especially like if you can do them in whatever order you want. Like putting 3 boons together, that's pretty decent. And then I guess the upside is, if you have Lost in the Woods, your Fools don't do anything, so you can discard them to get boons. Okay, fine, whatever. I mean, you rarely want more than one of these in your deck, because, like, playing a lot of Fools isn't great. You just want to play enough of them so that you can get Lost in the Woods every time you play your Fool, and try and keep Lost in the Woods on your side. So, like, is Fool good? It's okay. The thing is, you can get really lucky with Fool, which is very thematic and goes along very well. But from a competitive standpoint, it can be a little frustrating to play against. I think Fool's good enough to go for a lot of the time. And if you just get lucky, you're going to do really well with it. So, like, it has that same kind of feels bad man that Swindler has. It's not as good as Swindler, but it's going to lead to those situations. So, meh. How good do I think this card is? I'll give it a 6. There you go. I'm making up numbers. Pixie and Goat. So, yeah, Pixie's pretty simple. It costs 2, it's a cantrip, and then it's a 1-shot to get a boon twice. If you have 2, you want this. This is better than a lot of those $2 cantrips with upside. Like, way better than Pearl Diver and Pawn. And, like, probably better than Hamlet in a lot of situations. I know people really like Hamlet. It's a good card. It's not super fantastic. Pixie's really good. Goat. This heirloom is by far the most powerful heirloom because trashing is insane, and you get to do it, on turn 1 or turn 2. So Goat is just fantastic, and that's really what this is about. The fact that Pixie is paired with Goat, I know Donald has mentioned this, but like it prevents you from high rolling with the Flames Gift here and blowing out your opponents. So I really like the way these two interact with each other, and the Goat allows you to, they have thematic connections, right? But the Goat allows you to thin so that you can play your Pixies more often and really be patient to find exactly the thing that you want. Anyway, I really like this card. I think it's good for the game, and I'm going to give it a 5. Like this is never going to be all that fantastic, but like it's a cantrip and it's 2 and it's good. It's a good card. So yeah. Tracker. So I remember when Pouch didn't have the dollar. Has $1 now. This is way better. It's a good card. Tracker's a lot like Bard. It costs you terminal space to get a boon. Now it has this effect here, right? This Royal Seal effect. It's rare enough that you actually want to draw a card to put Royal Seal in your deck to get this effect. So the fact that you have to even use your terminal space to get it makes this effect like less and less relevant. So Tracker's not that strong of a card, and it's terminal, so like terminal cards, they have to do something amazing, and this isn't particularly amazing. I'm going to give Tracker a 3. Cemetery. I really like this card. It's a novel idea for a victory point card, and it's a VP card that trashes. So how do you actually make use of this card? Well, you need draw, right? You need $4 to spend, and then you also need to have stuff to trash. Enough stuff to trash so that your deck is actually thinner when you do this. So without draw, this is really not good, right? It's $4 for 2 points, but eh. So you really have to have draw to set this up. But if you do, then it's thinning, and it's a novel kind of thinning. So this is a really fun card to play against. Also, the most important thing about this card is that I realize I've been spelling cemetery wrong all my life. I spelled it with an A here, T-A-R-Y. I've spelled it that way all of my life. So, like, mind blown. Haunted Mirror. It's not too hard to trash this to a cemetery to get a ghost, and 1 ghost is going to make your deck a lot better. 2 ghosts makes your deck even better than that, but can't do that, LOL. So, you know, getting your 1 ghost is just fine. This is thinning, and it's an okay thinning card. You really need an enabler to make this better, but thinning is super great. I'm going to give it a 7. I realize that seems high, but this is $4 for 2 points as well. Even if the card had no points, I'd give it a 6. So that's what I think. I think Cemetery is worth 7. Puka and Cursed Gold. I really like these cards. I really like the interaction here. I really like that this is an heirloom. With any form of trashing, this is just absolutely fantastic. Like, just adding coppers to your deck to feed your Puka so you can draw is fine. It's not great, but it's fine. But the fact that it gets rid of your coppers in the first place is just... It's so good. Like, drawing cards and thinning all in one package. It's really good. The Curse Gold gives you these crunchy decisions. If there's no way to trash curses, like, you really should not be playing this all that much. If there is a way, then this is really, really, really good. So you're looking for other trashing to go along with your Puka. How good do I think this is? I think it's an 8. Here we are. This is my favorite card in the expansion, and one of my favorite cards in the game. I just love this card. It makes me feel so good. So, like, this is Aladdin, right? Like, this is the Cave of Wonders. Who disturbs my slumber? And then you go in there, and you get the lamp, and then, like, you have to sing the Friend Like Me with the Robin Williams from Aladdin, and then you get to wish, and then, like, whenever I wish, I always think of, in Zelda, Link to the Past... when you're getting the second pendant, you're going into that desert dungeon, and you just gotten the Book of Medora, and he's sitting there, and he reads it. It's like, make a wish, and your wish will come true. And then it has that little music while he's thinking about what he's going to wish for. So, like, whenever I play a wish, I always think about that. And then he wishes for the gate to be opened, and the little stones move around, and then you can go in. But I love these cards. They feel so good. How good are these cards? Well, Magic Lamp with any kind of support, you can pull this off, and wishes are obviously OP. Just wishing for gold is really, really, really good. And just imagine all the other things you can wish for. Like, this, wishes are so great. Secret Cave. It's an okay card, but the thing is, like, I'm rating these, same with Goat. Like, this is really good. Like, Goat was really good, but I didn't really factor that into my rating of Pixie, and I'm not factoring that into here. Just, you have to realize that this is possible, but you don't have to buy the Secret Cave to get this. So, the Secret Cave effect, it's okay. I mean, exchanging cards for money is usually not great, and this is worse than that, because you have to wait till next turn to get it. And, like, the start of your next turn getting money, like, that's not OP, like... getting actions or cards at the start of your next turn. So, I mean, it's a cantrip with an upside for 3. I'm giving it a 4. You're probably going to buy one to activate your Magic Lamp, but you would buy any other cantrip before this. So, Shepherd and Pasture. I really like this card. I'm saying this about all the heirloom cards. I really like that this exists. It makes me so happy. So the Pasture's worth points. It makes you think twice about trashing your estates. The Shepherd allows you to use those estates and your Pasture to draw past them and get other cards. Normally, when Shepherd's in the game, like, you kind of want one early on. Granted, you know, $4 is a lot to spend, and it's not something that I would want to open with, but, you know, it makes the decision, do I trash my estates, a little more difficult. There are really cool decks you can build, like the Crossroads style decks that use the green as fuel for part of your drawing. And, you know, those decks can have some really big turns. The problem with those decks is that they're not reliable, so you need reliability to make them work. And even then you're drawing cards, and you kind of have to have something to do with that overdraw. And something to do with that overdraw is actually really tough to do. To make it actually worth it. I mean, yeah, you can do stuff, but a lot of the times that's just overbuilding. Shepherd is best in puzzles when you get to assume perfect shuffle luck. It's a lot like Scout and Crossroads in that way. And you just kind of have to keep that in mind. It's a good card. but I have a feeling people are going to overrate this card. I'm giving Shepherd a 6, and I could see people giving Shepherd a much higher number, and I think they're overrating it. All right, let's talk about hexes. There's 12 of them. Hexes are like boons, only they're bad. There are ways you can hex yourself, which, is bad, but sometimes you got to do it. And then there are ways you can hex your opponents. I, along with probably a lot of other people, enjoy hexes more than boons. The reason for this is because when I'm building my deck, I want to be very precise about the things that my deck does. And boons are just like random little tidbits. You can't really play around them, so Hexes, on the other hand, correspond to a lot of other different types of attacks in the game. So like Swindler, sometimes it doesn't do anything to your opponent. Sometimes it wrecks them. That's just the nature of attacking your opponent. Pretty much any attack is not going to hit 100% of the time, and sometimes it's going to totally wreck them. So the hexes are like that. You just play a bunch of hexes. You play a bunch of swindlers. You're eventually going to make your opponent suffer. It's fine, right? So the hexes make me feel a lot better, and you just play a lot of... If you want to make your opponent suffer, you play a lot of them. Sometimes you dodge them and you're fine. That's not going to happen all the time. There are some states that go with a couple of the hexes. Diluted. This one hurts sometimes. I've gotten wrecked by diluted probably the most. Like locusts is probably the worst one to get, but like sometimes it doesn't hurt you, right? Diluted though, like when it hits, like you really need some ice cream. So let's talk about the hex cards. First, the ones that hex you. So here's Curse Village. +2 actions, draw to 6, and then you get a hex when you gain it. So a card like this, you usually want a lot of if you're going to play a draw to X deck. And this is the first time we've seen like a village and a draw to X effect in the same card. What does this do for draw to X decks? Well, Wandering Winter and I made a great podcast on draw to X decks and cards. And I think it's still relevant. Those decks have issues with reliability. And Curse Village helps that. On the other hand, it doesn't fix it. It just helps, right? You still going to have reliability issues. Before you had to find one copy of 2 cards to kick off. Now you just have to find a copy of 1 card. But you still need other stuff to do. So you kind of need to find some of your other stuff too. It just makes it a little more likely to have decent turns. It doesn't make it more likely for you to actually have your full turn, which is still difficult to do with draw to X decks. So it's a good card. Don't get me wrong. It's so good that at 5 it needs a nerf to be balanced when you gain it. And so this is the kind of card you want a lot of. If you want a lot of these, you're going to be buying a lot of them. You're going to get hexed a lot, and like the hexes are going to hurt you at some point. You can't dodge all of the hexes. It just can't be done. This is great in draw to X decks. It enables draw to X decks that weren't possible before. That's a big deal. However, as a village, it's actually not that good. Like, sometimes you just want to put all your cards in your hand and then play the cards. And Cursed Village is a Necropolis a lot of the time when you do that. Like, it draws you 2 the first time, which is good, but like after that, it's still a Necropolis. So like, it's worse than other villages in a variety of decks. And those decks where you put all your cards in your hand, like, those are better than draw to X decks. They're better. Even the draw to X decks that this enables. So, this is a good card. I'm going to give it an 8. I can see giving it a 9. I think this is one of the tougher cards to play with, which is why I like it. Leprechaun. Gain a gold, get a hex. If you have exactly 7 cards in play, you don't get hexed, but you get a wish instead. I like this card. $3 gain a gold is really good. Even if you get hexed, it's really good. So like this is a good card because gold's a good card. I typically don't like to pick up Leprechaun, though, until I have a shot at activating it. And you need villages and some decent source of draw to make that happen. So, this is great with villages. It's okay without them. I'm going to give this a 7. I think Leprechaun's a very good card. Skulk. So, comparisons. It's like a Marauder, only you get a buy instead of the spoils. I think that's the most potent comparison. Giving out ruins is not as bad as giving out curses. So yeah, it's a buy, so sometimes you need that. The other thing is this when you gain ability. Skulk is actually decent to open with because gold is great to put in your deck. I would give this card a 4. I don't really have that much more to say about it. Like, you want to, if you can play a lot of Skulks, that's good. So sometimes you're desperate for an attack, sometimes you're desperate for plus buy. Otherwise, this is not a great card, and you're getting it for the gold and hoping to trash it later. I give it a 4. Tormentor. I have never seen or played with this card before. What does this do? $2 if you have no other cards in play, gain an imp. Otherwise, each player receives the next hex. So $2 hex your opponents, and sometimes you get an imp instead. Imp is fine with this card. So, like, it's worse than Mountebank by a lot. It's a $5 terminal silver with a kind of light attack. The problem with these terminal cards that hex your opponent is that you want to do it a lot, so being terminal makes it hard to do. And you have other attacks that have more potent effects when you play them, so, you know, it's an unfavorable comparison to that. I guess I'm going to give this a 5. I'm going to give this a 5. Werewolf. All right, so this is actually the only night action card in the game, and I remember this one pretty well. This is a cool card. So you play them as draw, right? But if you drew them dead or you don't need any more draw, then you can just spam hexes at your opponent. So, like, Village Werewolf decks are not quite as potent as Village Torture or Village Wild Hunt decks, but, like, they're pretty good. Hexing your opponents quite a lot is a thing. +3 cards is a really, really, really good ability. You want to play this for +3 cards if you can. It's very rare that I'm going to have an action and choose not to play this card if I can draw 3 cards instead. Meaning I haven't drawn my deck. Just because I want to hex, right? I give this card a 7. I'm thinking about an 8. It's a good card. Changeling. So this is one of those weird combo cards, and this art... This is weird. Like, this reminds me of an anime or something. It's just very different than what you want. So, like, Changeling is pretty bad unless you have something to enable it. And enabling this is kind of wonky. It's so situational that it's kind of difficult to actually make it really good. So, like, it's bad most of the time. It's situational. And then in a lot of those situations, it's kind of slightly better than not Changeling. I guess, you know, when you have, like, on-buy abilities or even on-gain abilities, sometimes I think you can do some cool stuff with Changeling. Or, like, after you're up and running, you can try and use it as, like, a feast variant where, like, you want to buy your expensive thing for 3, and then, like, get a more expensive card, but you only paid 3 for it by delaying it for a turn and drawing it. So I guess it's kind of like how Feast was, but really different. I'm giving Changeling a 3. But, like, there are cool tricks you can do. Whatever. Cobbler. It's a workshop, but it gains the card to your hand next turn. So, like, this is really good. I mean, gaining a card to your hand at the start of your turn, like, that saves turns. That's why Transmogrify was amazing. This doesn't trash, but, you know, it doesn't have that wonky... Sometimes you didn't want to trash the thing that happens. Cobbler's great. It's a non-terminal gainer, and it gives you a card next turn. So, like, it compares about... It's very similar to Devil's Workshop in power level, so I'm going to give this one an 8 as well. It's a fine card. Conclave. So this is a village, right? But only a village if you can play something unique. So it has that imp kind of effect to it. It doesn't draw a card. It gives you $2 instead. This is a tough village to activate. If you draw them in the middle of your turn, you're going to have fewer options. And the fact that this doesn't draw a card really makes the card weaker. So, like, this is weaker than a lot of other villages. I'm going to give it a 6. Maybe I should give it a 5. But I'm going to give this a 6. That's about what I think of it. Crypt. So Crypt is a really cool card. I didn't play with this at all until the previews. This is kind of like a combination of Mint and Archive, right? Archive, and then it gives you a card in your hand at the start of a bunch of turns. And Mint, in that if you draw all your treasures, then you get to thin them. So Crypt is great with draw. You draw your deck, you put a Crypt in it, and then you have a big turn, and then all of a sudden you're thin. And then the coppers trickle back in, which is fine, whatever. Like, they come back in. Normally, when you're thin, though, you get to build a lot faster, and so the trickle of coppers doesn't really hurt all that much. This is treasure trashing. It's pretty good, but it's a little better. I don't know. I think it's a good card. I'm going to give it a 5 or a 6. What do I want to give this? I'll give it a 6. The problem is when you're drawing your deck, usually you want to draw all your payload. So this prevents you from doing that if you use it. Also, like, if there's any other thinning, you usually don't go for this. So that's why I want to give it a 5. Just so often, it's just very clearly irrelevant. I'm going to give it a 5. Final answer. Den of Sin. It's a lab for next turn. It's slightly better since you can't draw it dead, and it's gained to your hand. Den of Sin is a great card. The big disadvantage it has over lab is that you need 2 copies of the card in order to draw your thing. To get the draw effect every turn. So, like, it gives you 2 cards at the start of your turn. It gives them both to you. Like, it's not a cantrip. It's not like Caravan. It gives them both at the start of next turn. Lab is really good. I think I might have given Lab an 8, so I would give this a 7. Having the cards at the start of your turn is generally worse because you need more copies to actually increase the payload of your deck. It's sacrificing that for reliability. I'm giving this a 7. It's a good card. Good card. Non-terminal draw is great. Ghost Town is basically like that, only instead of being a lab, it's a village for next turn. And you get the entirety of that effect, like you're actually drawing the card next turn. You're giving it up for now. And it's gained to your hand as well. Villages are real good, but again, you have to have 2 copies of this to make it work. I'm going to give this the same rating I gave Den of Sin, which is a 7. I would even consider making this lower because terminal space is something that you typically want to have a lot of. And let's say there's 10 of these in the pile. Some games of Dominion there are. There's 10 of these in the pile and you get 5 of them. Your terminal space is like 3 or 4 actions in a turn. So, like, it's pretty limited. You have to get a lot of copies of this to make it good. So, sacrificing payload for reliability, still pretty good. I'll give it a 7. Guardian. So this is like Lighthouse. It gives you immunity to attacks, only it doesn't give you the dollar this turn. It can't be drawn dead, and it's gained to your hand. Gaining to your hand is a big deal. Lighthouse is a really good card, but gaining to your hand, that's a big deal. You don't have to get this until you suspect that they have an attack. So, like, with plus buys, this is just great. Even without them, it's still pretty great. But it doesn't give you that same kind of economy that Lighthouse does. So this is more of a tactical play. This is worse than Lighthouse, for sure. I would probably... I think I might have rated Lighthouse maybe a 7. And I'm going to rate this like a 4 or a 5. I'm going to rate it a 4. Once it's in your deck, like, it's still not super great. It's lackluster. Monastery. I have never played with this card before. For each card you've gained this turn, you may trash a card from your hand or a copper you have in play. So, in the early game, Monastery is like plus $1, +1 action, trash a copper. Right? And that's really good. Like, that's Forager levels of good. And Forager is great, and this only costs 2. this is way better than Forager in the early game for sure. And then if you get 2 things, that's just insane. Opening with this is great. This is a really good card. It doesn't give you plus buy, but that's really about it. Like, wow. This is a fantastic card. I want to give this an 8. Maybe a 9. I'm going to give this a 9. This is a really good card. Whew! This is really good. Yeah, we're giving this a 9. The fact that you get to play the copper, that's just so good. Yeah, I'm giving this a 9. This is a great card. Almost done. 4 cards left. Necromancer. So there's these zombies in the trash. A Necromancer can do a lot of different things. So Zombie Mason is pretty good. It's like Lookout. Only sometimes it's even way better because if it hits an estate, you get to gain something. Yeah, that's Zombie Mason is really good. You're buying Necromancer for Zombie Mason. And then, like, you know, Zombie Spy is okay, but you get to use it once, so you don't want too many of these. Zombie Mace is quite good, though. With other interaction with the trash, there's some crazy, kooky things that happen. That doesn't factor into my power level number. I'm giving it a 7. I would give Zombie Mason a 7, maybe an 8. But you can't get, like, too many of these, right? You can. You can get a few. Do I want to give this an 8? I'm giving it an 8. I'm giving it an 8. I'm doing it. Hashtag doing it. All right, Night Watchman. This is like Scout, right? +1 action. Cartographer for 5. You get it to your hand. The thing is, like, this does nothing for you on your current turn. That was why Scout was bad. So this is bad. Yeah. I mean, in a deck where this ability is useful, you can't spare the draw. I'm giving this a 1, and I'm thinking about giving it a 0. Should I give this a 0? Oh, man. You know what? This is first impressions. It's okay to be wrong. This is a 0. I'm giving this card a 0. 0 out of 10. Raider, it's an attack and it's a gold next turn for $6. Oucheroo. This attack doesn't hurt all that much. I mean, it's annoying. If you're desperate for something that says attack on it, like, yeah, play a Raider every turn, which you need 2 $6 cards to do, and you have to draw it. This is worse than gold a lot of the time, though. And gold's not fantastic in a lot of decks. I'm going to give this a 4. No, I'm giving it a 3. I'm giving it a 3. Raider gets a 3. And then finally, Tragic Hero. This is an interesting card. It's tough to build decks that play a lot of these because the Tragic Heroes die and it's tragic. But, like, you can have these cool mega turns with, like, you play your Tragic Heroes and you get to draw the treasures, right? It's also got a buy on it, so, like, it has those synergies. Like, it's great for big money, yeah. But it's got those synergies like bank and stuff like Council Room would have. It's a fine card. I would probably prefer Smithy to this in most decks. But it's pretty good. I'll give it a 5. Give it a 5 out of 10. Hi, I changed my shirt because I forgot to record these 2 cards. So let's go over them real quick. This is Vampire, and then it has this Bat non-supply card. I think this is really, really, really good. Like, without the Hex component, just non-terminal gain a 5-er, that's really good. So, like, if this was a card, just non-terminal gain a 5-er, I'd put that at, like, an 8. So now, you add the fact that it can trash, and the fact that it attacks. Like, this is really good. Like, this is probably the best card in the set. So, like, this is a 9, a solid 9. I mean, it's not a 10. It doesn't fit that definition, but, like, this is insane. This card is really good. I said insane. It's sane, but it's really, really good. So that's Vampire and Bat. And then Faithful Hound. So it's moat, only the reaction is not defense, but this weird wonky thing. So like it cares about being discarded like Tunnel does, and then it gets added to your hand next turn. So this doesn't really help you against attacks. It's just a way to, if you don't use it this turn, you use it next turn. So like it has a couple of synergies, like Warehouse, but I don't know, like the fact that you don't actually get to play it every turn to increase your hand size means that you really need those synergies, and you need a way to turn those synergies on. So like this part has its niche capabilities, but like this is just 2 cards for $2. So like, I don't know, 5? 4? I guess we'll give it a 5 and say this is worth something. So yeah, 5. The art's really cute. So 5. So that's my hot take. So yeah, Nocturne, it's a thing. And I rated the cards, and it took me 43 minutes to do. So yeah, thanks for watching. And by the time this gets released, I might make another video of me reviewing this so we can talk about how wrong I am. I can't wait. Yeah, so bye.